Okay. Now, some of you may have noticed I had a slight mishap on the invite today that went out on Outlook. That it's only booked in half an hour into your diary. Apologies for that. It is my fault. We are aiming to keep this as short as possible anyway, and I'd tasked Tony with keeping his part of the presentation to about 30 minutes, which he's confident he's managed to do. And we just wanted to allow a few minutes at the end for some Q&A as well. So I understand if you do have things to shoot off for, that's fine. Feel free to leave early. As I said, it is being recorded anyway, so we'll make sure this is available on our YouTube channel in the next few days, and I'll send everyone the link. We do have, so there will be things that pop up in the presentation, I'm sure, that will trigger some questions. So please use the chat box function of Zoom. It's at the bottom of your screen. Enter your question in there, and we will come back to it at the end of the presentation. This is actually going to be the first of a series of webinars we're going to run this year, all focused on sustainability. So this won't be the only time you'll hear from Tony. We've got a few in the pipeline, particularly those around the journey to carbon net zero, and the really positive role that golf clubs have got to play in that over the next few years. So keep an eye out for your emails from us and social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. We'll be sending those invites out that way. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Tony. The primary focus of his presentation is obviously going to be on the golf course side. I've got a few slides to run through very quickly at the end, just on some of the simple things you can be doing in the clubhouse in the immediate future. So Tony, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So as Tim has introduced, what we're looking at here is the impact of potential future hosepipe bans on the golf industry and how we can actually find alternatives. I put a note on here and a note to self to ask you, if you've got a QR code reader on your phone, if you can see if you can find that, because towards the tail end of the presentation, about 20 minutes, there is a QR code which will help you access the water charter and have a look at the terms of that once we've gone through. But I'll start off straight away. As I say, time is tight, and I will also say that the presentation is going to be available in a PDF format, so don't worry about making notes, and the recording will be available as well. Oh, there we go. So just to create a little bit of thought-provoking content, this was an article that I saw a month ago in The Guardian, and it's Minette Batters. I've been on a lot of calls and meetings with people representing the National Farmers Union. And basically what the NFU are saying is that we need more reservoirs across England to cope with severe water shortages. And that if we don't achieve that level of resilience, that extra water storage, that may impact food availability going forwards. And for the next half hour, you are no longer involved with the golf industry, but put yourself in the position as a water resource manager at one of the water companies just for this next half hour. One of the issues that they've been wrangling with, and we'll come on to in a bit more detail a bit later on, is where turf irrigation should come in that hierarchy of supply. And this is born of a question that came up a little while ago at one of these events. You can imagine from a water resource position, the companies have a lot of challenges going on, and we'll quantify exactly what the challenges they face are in a few slides' time. But they have obligations to provide hospitals, care homes, schools, domestic use, food production, energy. There's an ever lengthening list of demand for water, and it's where turf irrigation comes in that, and whether we can find sustainable alternatives. Spoiler alert, we can. So this isn't a hospital pass saying to you there's no water available, sorry, you're on your own. This is, there are alternatives, but we do need to work through that process. So to start with, who am I? Well, I've been involved in the golf industry. That terrified me when I looked at it. I've been involved in the golf industry now for 38 years. I've worked in sustainability, resource efficiency, and environmental management for 20. I've been Managing Director of Environmental Solutions since 2009. And I've been connected, I've been a Sustainability Associate with Gulf Environment Organization since 2012. I was looking at that figure actually with 40 geo verifications. It's not quite right. It's heading towards 50 now that I've actually done. I'm a certified member of the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management, practitioner with the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment, and I'm an associate member of the Institution of Civil Engineer. That kind of sets out the credentials. So I've been involved in the Gulf industry for a long time, but I cross over. More importantly, water resource planning. I've worked with the Environment Agency. I was a consultee at the development of the National Framework for Water Resource. I'm a consultee on the National Drought Group, and I work with the Environment on their Solent and South Downs equine engagement program, where they're looking at water quality and the impacts of equine businesses there because of a connection that we have with the Racecourse Association and the BHA. You will hear more about the Regional Water Resource Group, who are at the moment going through the process of developing the Regional Water Resource Plans. I am a member of the Multi-Sector Advisory Group for Water Resource East and for Water Resource Southeast. And I was retained by the English and Welsh water companies to create a project looking at water use in the leisure sector to inform the creation and the development of the National Framework for Water Resource, the Regional Water Resource Plans, and also the Water Company Resource Management Plans. So that kind of sets the position and the experience and the knowledge and the connections that I have with this process. And I think it's probably useful to start out by just explaining why water availability is changing. You've got 4 maps here giving rainfall anomalies. So basically it's providing you with information about 30-year average rainfall. And if it's blue, it means that there's more rain in that year than the 30-year average. If it's brown, it means that there's less. And you can see here, reading from left to right, you've got 2019, 20, moving across, 21, and then 22. And you can kind of see the development of the drought that we experienced in 2022. The other thing that I will just mention is if you look at the left-hand side, the 2019 data, you'll see that actually there's a big brown area across parts of the Midlands, North London, East Anglia. And then there's a white bit just to above it through the Midlands. Now, those of you who recall, there was flooding in 2019 through the summer. And that was caused by heavy rainfall events. But if you look at the average rainfall for that area, it's actually quite normal. So it's down to the fact that we're getting more intense, heavier rainfall events creating these issues, which is something that we can tap into as a potential advantage. We'll come on to that later. And just running through, I don't think I need to labour this point, but I'm sure all of you remember 2018 and 2019 and the floods I've mentioned, but it was really interesting that actually below that line from the Wash to the Bristol Channel, we had low rainfall. And then 2020, 2022, and then running into 2023. The water companies and the Environment Agency are saying that we are currently, from a hydrological point of view, in a worse position now than we were at the start of 2022. And there are still 2 areas that haven't come out of drought yet. They still have hosepipe bans. That's East Anglia and also Southwest. So that kind of covers the changes that we're experiencing in climate. So longer, hotter, drier spells and more heavier, intense rainfall events, creating localized flooding. But we also have to look at the other areas. And with your new hat as a water resource manager, we've got to try and manage personal consumption. And over the last 50 years, personal consumption has doubled. We've gone from around 70 litres per person per day to between, and it depends where you are, but between 145 and 165 litres per person per day. And we are very reluctant to go back to where we were 50 years ago. The government are trying to target around 110 or below as a good personal consumption. I think there's still quite a lot of work to be done to actually get to that point. And the other issue that we have to face is population growth. The image on the left-hand side, the deeper the red, the bigger the projected growth in population. And that takes you from 2021 or 2021 to 44, 45. So you can see that there are large areas in areas of existing water stress where we're having greater population growth. And just to make that fly for you, let's just refer back to that 2022 rainfall map. And you can see that correlation, that you've got big increases in population in areas where we just don't have water. So again, with your water resource hat on, you're starting to get a bit concerned. What can the water companies do? Well, in the short term, they've got really blunt tools. So temporary use ban is something that they can bring in during a drought to protect water supplies for those key supply areas. And the definition is the key part here. So the temporary use ban 2010 order defines a garden or and includes parks, gardens open to the public, lawns, grass verges. From our perspective, an area of grass used for sport or recreation. So that includes golf courses and other leisure sites. The only exemption that you get under that is if you are hosting a national or an international tournament. And I always bring this in so that if you've got an abstraction license, don't turn off at this point, because if you've got direct spray irrigation from abstraction, then there is a Section 57 notice, which is an equivalent for the Environment Agency. So if you've got an abstraction license, regardless of where you are within your limits and your licensed volume, you can be served with a notice which stops you from abstracting if they need that water elsewhere. So let's drill down a little bit more into the National Framework for Water Resource, or giving it its full title, Meeting Our Future Water Needs, a National Framework. It started in 2018, and it was created through a 2-year consultation period, and the Environment Agency was instructed to create that roadmap towards sustainability and to understand the likely volumes that we're going to be needing and where those volumes of water are going to be to accommodate and to build that resilience for a growing population. The report, the programme, required broad consultation, and as I mentioned, ESI were a consultee during the development of the national framework. And the final document was drafted and issued in March of 2020, and it was prescriptive. It set timescales and processes and infrastructure to achieve the outcomes that they needed over a period of time. The 5 regional water resource groups, because you've got a national framework and obviously it has to be implemented and reviewed at a regional level in terms of water consumption and use. The 5 regional water resource groups were created through a combination of EA governance and the local water companies. And they were tasked with looking at water use in a specific area, or for the 5 areas that covered the whole of England and Wales, and to engage with as many stakeholders as possible. So as they were developing the process of the plan going forwards for input from as many different water users in that area as possible. The plans are fitting in within that national framework set up and the timeline set by the Environment Agency and DEFRA. And just to give you an idea of where we are currently at, the timeline started in March 2020, you see on the left-hand side there, but we are now in the final stages. They've gone through the development of the plan, they've gone through all of the consultations, and we are now waiting as they're developing their final plans to publish and agree in September 2023, when they have to submit those to the Environment Agency and to DEFRA. Now, to give you a flavour of the challenge that they have, the panel on the right-hand side is an extract directly from the National Framework for Water Resource from 2020. And it says if we take no action by 2050 litres of water per day, and that isn't just in the southeast. Of the 5 regional water companies that regional water groups, that cover the whole of England and Wales, there is not one that currently has the projected volume of water that they need. Now, there is an amendment to this, so that 3,435 million litres was subsequently amended, but unfortunately it went up. So the current estimate is that it's over 4,000 million litres of extra water that we need per day. So we've got some challenges. Why are we talking to Gulf? Well, when we were running through the project and looking at consumption, we'll come on to the full detail of the project in a minute, but golf uses 8 times more water than the next largest leisure sector user. And that's not a criticism of golf. It purely is a function of the fact that there are 2,200 odd golf clubs. So there's a lot of golf clubs compared with football clubs or racecourses. But it does give an opportunity. And it comes into the solutions aspect that I was talking about before, that we can actually style the golf industry as being part of the solution, not part of the problem. We'll come on to the detail of that a little bit later on. So the project that I worked on was really simple, and the scope of the project is exactly as I put it here. So this is a copy and paste of the agreed project that we worked on that was funded by the English and Welsh water companies. And part 1 was going through that process of identifying, getting data from the Environment Agency, from the water companies and the water retailers to understand what the consumption totals were for the leisure sector and where it was coming from. But also to look at issues around the availability of water, because we can't ask a club to move away from using mains water if there's no abstraction available. So we need to find alternatives. But we needed to look at where water companies had issues with supply, low pressure, or just through volume or projected volume. In need of surface water attenuation, so something that the Environment Agency were very keen on. As we get those heavier, more intense rainfall events, is there an opportunity for the golf industry to capture some of that water and to use that in the place of mains water or unsustainable abstraction? Areas where water companies have combined sewer overloads, sewage discharges, big in the headlines at the moment. Something, again, that through attenuation, because we have a combined sewer system, if we can take out some of that flow from surface water that goes to sewers, that is going to help. And areas of over abstraction. The second part of the project scope was to engage with the associations. It seemed that the simplest way of actually accessing operators and to work with the associations and their membership. How can we help? What help do you need as an operator? How can the association actually work with the water industry to actually help promote that and find solutions and alternatives? And again, if you look at the bottom, this included discussions on land drainage, soft landscaping. All of this is set up to find problem water and to use that as a benefit, to use that in the place of mains water, or, as I say, unsustainable abstraction. And the final part was having engaged with the associations to work with them to find a way to engage with their membership, to create tactical tools. What help do you need? What's the decision-making process about how you use water? And how can we shift that so that we might be able to use that problem water and to store it? So that brought us on to the Leisure Operator Water Charter. And this is something I'm going to spend a little while on. I think we're doing okay for time. But this was the outcome from those discussions with the associations, is we needed to create an action plan, and the action plans from the associations were so similar that they ended up forming this water charter. And I don't think there's anything on this, as you scan through it, that probably you're not doing already. So providing information and education, members highlighting the urgent need for sustainable water use, reviewing and maintaining your own infrastructure, making sure you haven't got leaks, that you're applying your water as efficiently as possible. But working with the water companies, I've highlighted that because that is a big one, avoiding demand conflict during peak periods, so you can schedule your irrigation runs. Reviewing case studies, and there's a case study portal as part of this, but sharing good practice. What have you done that worked? What have you done that didn't work, so that nobody follows the same mistake? Or what have you done that did work that you would have done differently that might help smooth the process for somebody else following you? And to highlight the positive impacts. We're talking about water resilience, flood relief, creation of habitat. There's a whole raft of areas that this project can assist with. And that's something that, with the discussions we've had with Natural England and the Rivers Trust, they're very keen on, and also may lead to some assistance in the funding. The big one here is to be developing or have developed or updating an existing water resilience plan. I will come on to that. There is a template which was created that you can follow. It takes about 2 hours to create your water resilience plan, to give you the plan to go forward and implement, to at least point you in the right direction. and then to publish the charter. So I'm hoping that there is nothing there which is too scary. All of it is a commitment to take action, to create your plan, and to engage and to work collectively and constructively to find alternative water sources. The Water Resilience Plan template is kind of a hub. It's a spreadsheet. It's nothing particularly clever, but it collates all the information that you need and puts in various calculators. If you need to know your rainfall, your rainwater harvesting capacity, there is an element there. You put in the size of your roof and your car park, it will tell you how much water you're going to get potentially from that source. And that's always a good starting point, because that's water that you can access without having to get anybody's approval. But it also links into funding and guidance. We've got a lot of information on there from STURF, the Scandinavian Turf and Environmental Research Foundation. So it's a font of different knowledge and connections which will help you in that process. And as I say, all of that was funded by the water company, so it's all free to access. The other part of this process and the engagement process with the associations, there was a definite desire to have a platform to allow that direct discussion between the associations themselves, the representative bodies, and the environment agency, the water companies, and a number of other organisations. And we did that by putting together the Leisure Sector Water Working Group. And it was to smooth that process. It was to make it easier for you to access alternative water sources, to find out what the problems were in that journey, and then to help you achieve that and to smooth it through changes to legislation. We had on that first meeting 3 national leads from the Environment Agency. They have the ear of DEFRA. So we have that opportunity. And you'll see also that Natural England, the Rivers Trough, Cranfield University, and the regional water resource groups all attended that meeting. So we do have a portal, we have a connection, we have the ability to have those conversations about, well, what's the problem? How can we smooth that? How can we make it easier for you to transition to alternative sustainable sources of water? Now, Golf Club in Hampshire, I've put win-win-win. Actually, I think it needs another couple of wins at the top there. They were originally using 10,000 cubic meters of water from public mains for their irrigation. But through 2018 and 20, they had some issues, browning of their fairways, and they started that program to look at the potential for installing full fairway irrigation. It was going to take their irrigated area from 3 to about 30 hectares, and they applied for an abstraction license for what they projected would be their required volume, about 30,000 cubic meters of water per year, and the installation of a reservoir. The GM attended one of the meetings, something very similar to this, and we had a conversation. He signed up to the Water Charter and started accessing the Water Resilience template. And he started off with that, let's calculate the harvesting potential, rainwater harvesting potential, and he got to about 5,000. So not enough to get really excited, but a proportion. But as part of those discussions about what's over the fence, what's around you, where might you be able to access water, he volunteered the fact that there was a 180 house development going on just across the fence. And the discussion then went down, well, actually, they've got an obligation as a developer to have sustainable urban drainage, and you might be able to help them with that if you can access their water and runoff and help filter it and store that and use that for your irrigation. So the result, in summary, was they've come away from, or they will be coming away from mains irrigation. The water company were concerned because it could have gone from 10,000 to 30,000 if they didn't get an abstraction license. So the water company are dead chuffed, one of the wins. The increased demands that they want can be accommodated through sustainable sources, but you need to be creative about where you source that water. There are opportunities, there will be increasing opportunities for the use of problem water as irrigation water, providing multiple benefits. This alternative also ticked the box for the Environment Agency. Local flood resilience was a big problem. They had flooding issues. They needed to attenuate that water, stop it getting into that combined sewer network. And the reservoir itself, at the moment, we're in pre-planning stage with that, but they're going through a process where the design is going to include natural filtration and wetland creation, feeding into an irrigation reservoir. So Natural England and the South East Rivers Trust are really happy about that. So you're suddenly looking at a planning application, which is going to have a number of the statutory consultees in favour and with supportive statements. You're going to have positive statements from the Water Company, the Environment Agency, South East Rivers Trust, the Environment Agency and Natural England, which is a really powerful group of people to be supporting a project. Waterwise have supported this all the way through. They're the leading charity on water efficiency. I've highlighted one element there, or a couple of elements there, but it's hugely encouraging to see collaboration between the leisure and the water sectors through both the charters and the working group. And they go on to say, please consider signing up to the charter and making a commitment to move your organisation towards being more water efficient. Now, I mentioned if you've managed to find your QR code reader, here is your opportunity. But in summary, whilst you're doing that, what I would say here is that this whole project has been about finding alternative water supplies. Nobody wants to cut you off, but there are issues about water supply and availability. And we need to find alternative sources of water, but there are alternative water sources available. And we have backing from the Environment Agency, from the water companies, from Natural England, from the Rivers Trust. A whole raft of different organisations want to see that change. And that change is perfectly possible. But it needs you to take that through the process of adopting the chart and downloading your, and that gives you protection in the future. The simple truth here is for the first 15 years of the national framework, we are going to have to rely on demand management. As simple as that. Big infrastructure projects, new reservoirs take 15 to 20 years to get into the ground, and that's if everything goes smoothly. So initially, we need to have some work, some commitment from the water industry, but there is an equal commitment from from the Gulf industry. There's an equal commitment from the water industry to actually help you. So I need to take that off screen now, but I'm sure that can be made available. Hopefully everyone, if you're going to take an image, you will take your image or get your access to the water charter. And I will, having just about run out of time, I'm going to hand over to Tim now, who's got a few slides. And I think, as Tim mentioned at the start, we're going to go back to looking or to a Q&A. Anything that we don't get to, I'm sure it can be in the chat element and we can respond at that point. So just remains for me to say thank you very much and to hand back over to Tim.
Thanks, Tony. I'm just going to switch screens, so bear with me one moment. Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see this. So yeah, thanks, Tony, for all the information. I just wanted to, as I suggested at the beginning, I wanted to go through just a few slides on things that you can be doing in the clubhouse to sort of get the process started on being environmentally responsible with regards to your water usage. Before I do, I did notice we had a few people join sort of while Tony was talking. Just a reminder to everyone who joined later, everything's been recorded, so we will have this available to you, and we'll send it out in an email in the next few days. So we recently, I've just got to minimize something on my screen there, so I don't have to look at myself chatting. We recently had a presentation with one of our primary washrooms providers, PHS. And there were 3 products that really stood out, that were really simple to install, affordable, and immediately cut water usage in the washrooms area of the club. And I'm just going to give you a really brief overview. Together, they're designed to cut 70% of the water you use in the bathrooms in the clubhouse. First up, we have some clubs may already have these systems in place. Flow saver urinals, they're designed to be just a little bit more intelligent. A lot of the time, you have the flush on a urinal is just set to every half an hour, something along those lines, and it's just pouring water down the drain. These are designed to adapt to when you are busy at the busiest times of the club, to flush more often and less often when the club is quieter, during those quieter days. They work in conjunction with what PHS have as an eco shield. They work together to eliminate the smells coming from the urinal. So you're using a lot less water than you would have done previously, but you're not having to deal with smelly urinals all the time. And then finally, we've barely got any clubs with this particular product in place. It's a flow saver tap, and it cuts the amount of water that comes from the tap by 70%, but you don't notice a difference in the water pressure. Really, really simple and affordable to install. They fit on the vast majority of taps, and they take no time whatsoever to fit. And the payoff time is something like, I think it was something like 8 to 12 weeks is you pay off that initial investment in these. So they're really simple things that you can add to your environmental credentials from that point of view. Now, anything in the washrooms area that you wanted to have a comparison, if you wanted to understand if you've got these products in place, similar types of products in place, do get in contact. At the end of the webinar, when we send out the recording, I'll send out a link for you to be able to just get in touch, send us your details, and we can do a comparison on what you're doing, where you can save your water consumption in the clubhouse as well. So at that stage, I'll go over to any Q&A. Bear with me. And I think we actually haven't, Tony, it's a first. We haven't had any questions come through so far. We can, unless Tony, you've got anything else to add, anyone else has any questions they'd like to fire into the chat box, then I think we can wrap up. Of course, I'm sure there's going to be internal discussions after this recording's made available as well. So do feel free to get in contact. We'll point you in the right direction. The QR code that Tony shared is really, really useful. So I would really encourage you to have a look at that and go through that process. But Tony, anything from your side?
No, I don't think so. As I say, the key takeaway from this is that, yeah, water is getting scarcer in supply. From 2025 onwards, we'll have to wait and see what the actual water resource, regional water resource groups' plans are and how that shapes up. But there is a need to create resilience. You need to protect your futures, and there are opportunities there that you will find. All sorts of people will happily help you, but you need to start the process. You need to put your hand up to start with to get that access to that help.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tony.
Right.
Well, with that in mind, we'll end it there. Thanks for joining, everyone. As I said, we'll send out a follow-up email afterwards, and do feel free to get in touch with any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.